Now, if you want to have a vision of what it means to actually solve this, the answer comes from Buddhism. The Buddhists got something right, a lot more right than anything in the West. And the reason why I say that is because they run off this very interesting prescription for you. When you go to a Buddhist temple in order to save yourself, in order to fix yourself, in order to actually try to go in the pursuit of happiness, when you get sick of all the bullshit of the world and all the nogginism that is around, and you go to the Buddhists, what will happen is they will sit you down and they won't teach you any ideology. They are unideological. They don't actually tell you anything. They don't help you. They don't do anything like that. They sit you down and say, you're a dickhead and I don't like you. And you're full of shit and you don't know anything and you need to shut the fuck up and start listening to me. And they're like, what the fuck? And they say, all I want you to do, this is just one thing I want you to do. I want you to calm the chattering voice in your head. This is the first principle. I want you to calm down the monkey mind, is what they call it. The barking, blathering voice in your head. If you cannot tame that, there is nothing that we can do for you. There's no way you can ascertain happiness until you calm the mind down, until you discipline the mind. Now, this is fascinating because there's no sort of like, here's our nogginist ideology. Here's a book that we're going to cuck you with. There's no book cuckism. There's none of that stuff at all. It's all about an actual physiological prescription, an actual body-based procedure, an exercise that you have to do, meditation as they call it, in order for you to tame the voice in your head. Now, if we prescribe this understanding of the left hemisphere and we actually look at this, it actually looks an awful lot like what the Buddhists are intuitively doing is they're shutting the fuck up that left hemisphere that's blathering in your brain. They're cooking the noggin because they understand, they saw very intuitively that the problem for most people was that they were led around by this demonic force of nogginism that was pulling them into the realm of delusional abstractions and pulling them away from the true source of their problems, which was the inflammation and damage and lack of ritual and lack of connection with their body. And so the premise and the first principle and the thesis of the beginning of the Buddhist endeavor is that you go to them and they suggest you, they give you this vision. They suggest to you that you are like a person who owns a dog, and the dog is running and the dog is barking and pulling you around, and you are not walking the dog is walking you. You're getting pulled around by the dog, your arms getting stretched off you, and the dog leads. The dog is your talking, chattering mind. And if you are to do if you were to ascertain anything, what you need to do is you need to calm that dopamine dog. You need to calm the talking, chattering dog. You need to bring the dog under your control. You need to tame the dog. That's foundationally what has to happen. There's no opinion. There's no teaching. There's no reward. There's no morality. There's none of this stuff matters. There's no religion. There's no ideology. None of this. Until you tame the dog. The beginning, the first place you start is the controlling of the dog, controlling of the nog. Get the nog under control. That's what you have to do. And the thing about this is that it's very, very simple how they do it. It's so simple. They basically just get you to sit down, you breathe. And when the chattering brain comes online, what it'll do is it'll try to distract you. It will bring the left hemisphere, bring its narrow focus away from what you're trying to get it to do. And all you need to do is you just learn to come back to the breath. So what the Buddhists want you to do is start to create a center within the mind that is not the nogginizing mind, not the jattering mind, not the blathering mind, not the left hemisphere. They want you to create a center, a present center that is really in reality. And this is the one thing you don't want to do, because remember, you as the neurotic modern, the presence is pain. If you become present and just pay attention to what's going on around you, you will notice all the inflammation and all the pains, and you'll need to escape. You'll need to escape to the Netflix film. You'll need to escape to the next sports thing, or the next drug, or some type of intellectual quest like the meaning crisis. You'll need to escape, but you can't get present. And when you actually do get present, it's full of pain. It's full of all that type of stuff, so you avoid it. And so what they do is they get you to discipline yourself to this presence. And then the blathering mind and the dog is trying to pull you away. And then eventually, over time, you build up the repetitions like lifting weights. And slowly over time, the dog learns to actually go quiet. The dog learns to listen to you. The dog, the blathering mind, the intellect, the left hemisphere learns that is not as in control, that you deflate it, you take power from it. You stop allowing its dopamine cycles to just go crazy. And it calms down, it stands at your foot like a tamed dog. It stands right beside you. And it's not anything too romantic. It's not this profound thing of nirvana or enlightenment. It's none of this type of stuff. Even though that's obviously one of the theses people go into it, that's not necessarily the promise. They all constantly say to you, you're probably not going to achieve enlightenment. Stop trying to achieve enlightenment. No, it's not going to happen. There's no promise of God. There's no promise of salvation. They're just sort of saying, listen, you do this procedure, do this thing, this method correct, this 3,000-year-old method, do this correct, and you will see a result. And the thing is that they actually deliver. They deliver very firmly and elegantly. It's very simple and it's very, very correct. You calm the chattering mind and you become conscious and presence of your actual felt experience, your actual reality. And it does actually gets the noggin out of the way and allows you to begin the work of actually creating happiness and creating joy. And the science proves that these people were right. There's plenty of evidence of, the EEG scans and whatnot showing how they've got more interesting brains. They've got thicker prefrontal cortexes. They create all these happiness chemicals. They create the neurotransmitters go all firing up. They have all these experiences of from meditating on love. They create gamma rays and stuff like this. There's copious amounts of evidence about the science proving that these people were doing something correct. And the thing is that liberation becomes more about taming. It's not obviously about, we're not trying to just blow the left hemisphere out of all our brains. The Buddhism mass lobotomization of the human race is not something that we're going to engage in anytime soon. Because that's not correct. It's not about hating the left hemisphere. It's not about hating the intellect. It's not about hating the noggin. It's about de-pedestalizing and taking the noggin's authority off your rulership of the mind. There's not just one intellect, and that is not you, and everything else is just an irrelevant automaton. The Cartesian dualism is wrong. All right, the noggin, the thinking left hemisphere is just one little faction of a giant army, which is you. And the body and the heart and the belly and the balls and the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, and all of this comes together as a unified force, a big psychic entity. And you need to learn how to serve all of this if you want to get it right. And usually your big problem is the leadership is placed within your left hemisphere. The leadership is placed within your noggin. And the Buddhists give you the first principle in order to get over that, actually taming this beast that is getting in the way. Now, this Buddhism is brilliant because it delivers, but oftentimes people overlook the next derivative questions about this, about how to actually save yourself by then understanding the present realities of what's going on with the body and then moving forward with them into a true life-changing experience. Now, the elegance and simplicity of the Buddhas is profound in that it exposes the crudeness of the approach from the Westerners. But of course, there's also a flip side where the Buddhists are somewhat incompetent and they don't have the kind of thumos and aggressiveness and assertiveness that the Westerners have as well. There's upsides and downsides to everything. So the Buddhists are foundationally correct about needing to tame this mind. You can call it the monkey mind, you can call it the barking dog mind, you can call it the left hemisphere, you can call it the noggin, whatever you so wish. But it just works. It just works, and there's evidence to show that it works. Now, the mistakes in the Western front is that they reward the noggin. They see the noggin, the blathering, the left hemisphere. They see the noggin as something that they need to tame and control. Similar enough to the Buddhists, but their attitude towards this is the magic book. They take the jargon in the magic book from Christianity and they want to force the left hemisphere to say the words that they hold in the magic book. They want to hold authoritarian control over the words of the left hemisphere, or they want to control the conscience. They want to control the thinking, blathering mind. And so what they do is and you even think about the attitude of prayer. Prayer is about reciting words until it programs into the left hemisphere exactly the words that you quote unquote should say. That's the way that the West approaches this. It's similar enough to you have the dog that's pulling the owner around barking, and the Westerner barks back at the dog. They bark at the dog and try to make the dog bark in a certain way. Now, in a crude sense, when that fails, they begin then to punish the dog. They begin trying to silence the mind, or of course, in this case, the whole person. If the person doesn't recite the Christian doctrine, they would have got murdered, they would have got killed, they would have gotten a lot of trouble, ostracized from society. Then nowadays even, and I'm not saying this is exclusively Christian, it's human nature, if you will, and nowadays if you go to a psychologist, they do the exact same thing. They try to recite jargon, bark at your left hemisphere, fill your consciousness with all these new labels and jargon, borderline personality disorder, electra complex, all this Jungian nonsense, all this neuroticism from psychology, a 100-year-old project, if you will, and they try to fill the dog with this type of stuff. And then, of course, when the person is not saved, when the person is still in pain because they're incorrect, they're just feeding the noggin more nogginism, they drug the dog, they drug the person, they drug the mind, they try and make the mind go away, which is, again, I guess, one step forward in the correct place. They're actually dealing with the chemistry of the body, but still incorrect in its sort of facility and the way that it's approaching things. It is a massive, massive mistake. And this is all just a signal of profound crudeness, profound inability to reason from first principles, profound inability to control and discipline the intellect. So these are all things that the Buddhists elegantly got hundreds of years before the West even kicked into gear as an actual like institution and world. They got this right, you know? They got this foundationally right.